And still the lighting is weird. There we go. Haha. Hi, we're in a super casual angle today. This is the like close-up of my bed. I've got you propped up on all the books I'm hoping to start this week in preparation for Becca's Bookopoly-thon. And the sun has been streaming in so violently through my window, even though it is the middle of winter, that the lighting was so awful that we had to find the one little section of shade in my room. Hi, welcome to my June wrap-up. Alright, so I read a bunch of books in June. What is words? A lot of them. A lot of 4 and 5 stars. I actually had a lot of 5 stars, more than I was expecting. I don't think I had anything, or I had 1 2-star, that's right. A good handful of 3 stars. There were no DNFs, which is exciting. And yeah, lots of 5 stars. So let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing I read in the month was Bury the Lead by Gabby Dunn. This is a graphic novel. I think it's going to be a series. I think it's more like a comic, but I'm honestly not really sure. It's about a junior reporter trying to get her big break, and she kind of ends up in a weird like Legally Blonde scenario where a woman in prison decides that she's the only person she'll talk to. It's a bit weird. I gave this 3 stars mainly because it's pretty problematic. It fully goes hard on the anything to get a story route, which like is questionable. And yeah, it just was not great, but the art style was interesting and the character dynamics were fun, but it's pretty problematic. It's queer, kind of, in the same way that Gabby Dunn in her everyday life is like queer, so the character is queer, but it's not the focus of the story. Though there is a lot of sex, saying that. Yeah, it was weird, but it was alright. I gave it 3 stars. Next up I listened to The Vanishing Trick by Jenny Spangler. This is a middle grade mystery fantasy story. We follow these kids who get caught up in a magic con plot where they are pretending to be the ghosts of missing children, but really they're just missing children who can be magicked in and out of these like bottles, I guess, and the magician lady that's doing it to them is running like a paranormal ghost con using them. But it's also magic. To me it didn't work perfectly because those 2 elements, like it didn't hit far enough mystery or far enough fantasy for me, so that the 2 elements kind of didn't blend right. But it was fun and enjoyable and the writing was fun. It just kind of didn't quite hit perfect for me, so I gave it 4 stars. Next up I read Alice Miranda at School by Jacqueline Harvey. This is an Australian middle grade series. It's really long. It follows Alice Miranda, who is a pretentious British schoolgirl. At least I think she's meant to be British. In like a public school, like a British public school. And she's like a child, literal like 8 or something. Very pretentious, but she's also kind of funny and wholesome. I gave this 3 stars. I feel like it's definitely aimed at a younger audience, and for me it just didn't hit all the beats I wanted it to, but it was still really good and I would recommend it for that age group, definitely. Yeah. She's not the most likable character, but she's sweet. Then I listened to another middle grade. This is The Haunting of Luna Moon by Guy Bass. I'm pretty sure Guy Bass is also Australian. This is a creepy, eerie short middle grade series. And it's following the idea of unimaginary friends. So like your imaginary friend becomes unimaginary, like real. And it was really fun as well. I gave this one 4 stars. I liked it a lot more than the first book in the series. The plot was just hit the right kind of beats for me. It was really cute. Our main character Luna Moon has always lived just her and her grandfather. Well, there's a whole family Oh, I'm gonna spoil it. Her grandfather's been really abusive to her, and then he dies and they're at the funeral and her whole family start disappearing, and it's so cute. While we're talking about middle grades, I'll quickly jump ahead to Amelia Fang and the Memory Thief, which is another short series. Amelia Fang is obviously a vampire and it's subverting all the like paranormal tropes. It's adorable. I love the series. I gave it 4 stars. In this one, people's memories were going missing. Everyone just couldn't remember each other and everything. And it was so cute. I just had a great time with it. It was very fun, fast. This series is just like really good, short, middle grade. Now on to some non-middle grade, because I did start the month on a little bit of a middle grade binge. We have Ink in the Blood by Kim Smejkal. This is a YA, I would say, but it might be considered just adult fantasy. I'm honestly not 100% sure. This is a tattoo magic fantasy. We follow this world where there was a goddess kind of figure who would tattoo, she could tattoo herself and send that tattoo onto someone as like a prophetic image for them, and help them make their life happen. But then she was lynched and killed because people didn't like their tattoos that they were getting from her. And then there was someone who claimed to be her reborn, who was then also lynched and killed. But their whole society has these people who, like, the dreams, not the dreams, the tattoos still appear because there's this whole society of people who are given the magic to make tattoos, and orders are getting passed down to send people out these tattoos. But these 2 girls, what are their names? Can't remember. Celia and Anya. They think it's all a bit corrupt and that somebody is just manipulating the whole system for their own design, which is kind of the case. And they escape to join the circus, or a circus, but everything's catching up to them, and their circus act is very, like, they use the tattoos for each other. Like, they can make them temporarily appear on each other to send messages, and they use that for their circus act, and everything just kind of like spirals and intensifies and goes from there. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. It was so good. I loved the romance. There's a romance kind of between the like oldest son of the circus owner and Celia, but it's much more about the friendship between Celia and Anya, and how that plays out. And the romance is so disaster buys is the romance definition here. They can't get it together, and it's very second thread, but they're constantly like lusting after each other. It's very like insta lust, but they don't love each other. They're just like super interested in each other and they have a vibe together, and it's just like when they come in contact they're constantly like hardcore flirting and vibing. But I like that it wasn't like, I love you and I have to do everything for you. She didn't give a shit in the long term about him. It was about her bond to Anya, which I really appreciated. I definitely am going to pick up book 2 in this. I mean, I'm hoping by the time we get to like the culmination of the plot, I'm pretty sure this is just a duology, that this is going to be like a 5-star duology. I hope and pray. I really enjoyed this. Next, we have my 2-star read of the month, and that is Rules for Perfect Murder by Peter Swanson. I hated this. I really thought I would love it. Okay, so on one side I enjoyed elements of this, but also I thought the narrator was such a pretentious fuckwit, and he was oozing like toxic masculinity from every pore. He was so entitled, and he's like, we have fridging, we have he thinks the whole world revolves around him, and then I guess because of the way the novel is structured, it does. I thought the plot twist was like, ooh, but also like didn't make up for the drudgery that was this short book of him being a pretentious fuckwit. Yeah, I liked the concept. Yeah, I thought some of the reveals were interesting, but the narrator just, I couldn't deal. He was a fuckwit. Then I read Blood of an Exile by Brian Naslund. I gave this 3 stars. Sorry, I'm looking at my notebook here where I got all my star ratings. I gave this 3 stars. I enjoyed it, but I just didn't love it. I found it a bit hard to get through. I listened along to the audiobook for this. And yeah, it was entertaining, but it was very man's fantasy. We've been talking a lot in the community, especially on Twitter and stuff lately, about male-led fantasy and men writing in fantasy, and the like misogyny that is just inherent in, or like expected to be inherent in fantasy worlds. This definitely fed into that. Even though one of the point of view characters is a woman, it was very much a man's world, and even the female characters were like a little underdeveloped for sure. I don't know, I don't even know how to feel about this. It was fine, but it didn't have the fast pacing that I wanted from a high fantasy. It very much slowed down the pace a lot of the time. It tried to be brutal, and it was brutal in some scenes, but then other scenes were just really not. And yeah, it just didn't hit right for me for some reason. And I didn't absolutely fall in love with the main character. He was interesting. He had a kind of Ned Stark vibe, like in trying to be wholesome, but he was also pretty brutal. I don't know, I have so many mixed feelings. I probably won't continue the series. Then I listened to another middle grade, and that's the Nothing to See Here Hotel by Stephen Butler. Can I even remember the plot of this? Oh, yes. So we follow Frankie, whose parents own a hotel that deals with magical creatures. This was very short, hence why I can't really remember it very well. But a goblin prince comes to stay, and he's very demanding and an asshole. And they're all trying to rush around looking after this prince. Honestly, this was not super memorable for me. I remember a few scenes, but I can't really remember how it ends. And I didn't read it that long ago. I gave it 3 stars. It was fun. It was a fun time. I think kids would definitely enjoy this series. It's very sweet, and funny. Just not memorable for me. Then we had my first 5-star read of the month, which was The Black Flamingo by Dean Adder. This is a novel told in verse following a black queer teen in Britain. He's is he Jamaican? I can't remember now. He's a drag queen, and it's exploring first time sex scenarios, coming out, the constant need to come out constantly in your life. It doesn't just happen once. All those kind of things. And within the like contextual idea of he's mixed race. His mum is Greek, maybe Cypriot, and yeah, his dad, who's not in the picture anymore, is Jamaican, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And so his connection to his like Greek Cypriot culture from his mum's side, and she's kind of distanced herself from that, so he doesn't feel super close to that, versus like his Jamaican side, and he looks obviously black, but and so gets kind of excluded from his mum's side of the family to an extent, like when people are looking at him, but he doesn't ever, like his black dad is out of the picture. So he's kind of like troubles connecting with his identity in that way, as well as adding the queer stuff, and it was just so well done. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. The poetry was just really good. And I liked the way it explored the concepts of gender in drag, which I feel like is, like, it's there. And obviously drag is like a genderfuck kind of whole scenario, but the way that this presented drag is like there are so many ways to do drag and to express different gender identities in drag was perfect. I really enjoyed that. Then next up, I read Ruthless Gods by Emily A. Duncan. This is a chunky boy. It is the sequel to freaking what's it called? Wicked Saints, and I enjoyed this, but I was confused for the end. I wasn't sure what was happening. I do think this pacing wise works better than the first one, but as with the first one, the ending was whacked out and I had no idea what was going on. I'm really interested to see what happens in book 3. But the dynamics in this were really fun, and all the different angles that were being explored. My only problem is I feel like sometimes the narrative pacing in these books doesn't feel natural. Like, it doesn't feel like that was the inevitable decision that had to be made based on what was going on. Like, sometimes people were doing things that seemed very left of field, but overall I really enjoyed the plot. It was a fun story. The atmosphere is great, which I think this series is really perfect for. And yeah, I gave it 4 stars. Next up is a book that's like a 2.5 stars. So it's bordering between a 2 and a 3. I ended up giving it a 3 on Goodreads, but it could be a 2. And that is Aurora Burning by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is the sequel to Aurora Rising. I buddy read this with April and Paige, and we all hated it. For one, like, when I read book 1, I really enjoyed it. I thought the writing was campy, but in a way that was fun. This took it too far, so the campiness in the writing really pulled me out of the story consistently. I didn't mind the plot, but there were whole character perspectives that I hated reading from because they just dragged me right out of the story. There's a whole like 2-page monologue from a female character about her boobs. It was awful. I just wanted to crawl into a hole and not read it. Kind of funny in that we read it out loud to each other, and it was hilarious to read as a group, but it pulled us so far out of the story. There's some like the romance elements were awful, hated them, but there's like a kind of time travel element plot in this which hasn't fully played out and will obviously play out in book 3. So I'm probably going to read book 3 just to figure out where the plot goes. It's got a cliffhanger, again, which is like kind of tempting me to figure out what happens in book 3. But yeah. Ditch the romance, fix up the writing style, please. Then I read Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Ames. This is another adult high fantasy. Oh, I didn't say, this is sci-fi, if you couldn't tell. Ruthless Gods is YA fantasy, but probably should be new adult, I would argue. Kings of the Wild is adult fantasy. This is a very boys club kind of book, but in a way that worked better than Blood of an Exile. And the female characters have a bit more agency, I feel like. And I'm really excited to read book 2 because it features the female character as the lead. This is a getting the band back together story, and it really leaned heavily on that trope. It's literally like if Blues Brothers were a band of mercenaries, and they're going off on their mission from God. That's what this is. And I loved that it lent hard into that. It used a lot of musical references in funny ways, and I think that was its stronger suit. I just really enjoyed the writing and all the references and how that all played out. The plot was fun, though it is very much just like we're getting the band back together and they keep having obstacles thrown in their way on their way to like one goal. But it was thoroughly entertaining. I listened to the audiobook for this, or for most of it. I gave it 5 stars. It was just so funny and fun, and I'm really, really keen to pick up Bloody Rose, which is the sequel. Then I listened to a couple more middle grade books listening. We have The Mask of Arabella by Anna Houghton. This is a Venetian fantasy story where people with magic join this little like secret society and they have masks. This was fun. I feel like pacing wise it was a little off, but it was entertaining and fun. I gave it 3 stars. Then I also listened to Willow, Moss and the Lost Day, which is a little magical fantasy. Willow has the magic to be able to find lost things, and she has a like famous witch come to her door and be like, I need you to find me last Tuesday because no one can find it. Like, everyone's lost their memory of this day, and it kind of follows that plot line. It was very fun. Again, I gave it 3 stars. It was just a little straightforward. I might even bump it up. I feel like it's more like a 4 star. I definitely want to continue this series. It was fun and very empowering. I also listened to The Hidden Gallery by, what's this author's name? Mary Rose Wood, which is the sequel, the second Incorrigible Children of Ashton Place book. This one follows our main character, who's the nanny. I can't remember her first name. She is taking she's the governess. She's taking the kids into London on a little trip. This was so cute and fun. I love this series. The narration is great. She does the best voices. They're so pretentious, but I love them. I gave this 4 stars. Essentially, the series is about this governess who goes to look after these 3 kids who were raised by wolves, and she's trying to like fit them back into human society. But there's obviously the underlying mystery of who these kids were, which kind of came up in this a little bit, but will continue throughout the whole series. I think it's like a 6 or 8 book series. But yeah, they were in London getting lost, having a fun time. They went to the theatre. It was great. Next up, we have another 5-star read, and this was Shorefall by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the sequel to Foundryside. I adored Foundryside. I also gave it 5 stars, and I knew, like, going in that I was going to give this 5 stars. Just something about the writing is just perfect. The fantasy world is so interesting. The world building is perfection, and it all just builds up so well. It's all, I feel like it has the perfect real stakes. And everything just is like, what else can they do kind of scenarios, which is what I really want, like that drive of like, even if it's not the right choice, there's no other choice to make. That's my favorite kind of stakes, and this really feeds into that. We also have heist elements in this series, which just work so well, and I love the way the magic system is used to make these heists work in like just the right way. This was so fun. I loved it. I love this series. I would recommend it to everyone who enjoys high fantasy. The world building might seem complex. Essentially, they can write on stuff to make it think it's something different than it is. So you can like write on wood to make it think it's heavier than it is. You can like they have carriages that they can move around by telling the carriage wheels that they're on a hill kind of thing. And so they act as if they're on a hill. So that's kind of how the magic system works, but it's really complex, kind of, but you are learning, like they're trying to figure out the magic system and the rules of it. Apparently it's based on coding, so it's more about finding new ways to manipulate the code to do what you want it to do, and they're figuring that out as you do. So that's really fascinating and like helps you come along with the world building system. The magic system, it also, our main character can like talk directly to things, whereas everyone else has to like scribe on them. She can talk to them, so she's kind of like a hacker, and she's always been able to be like she picks locks by going up to it and being like, so you're meant to not open for anyone except this one person? Well, like, what makes that person a person? Are they a person? Like, she'll try and break their logic to get around them, and it's fascinating to see it in action. I love the way this is written. I just love this whole series. I can't wait for book 3. It's probably like 3 years in the future. Can't wait. If you wanted to see my thoughts on any of like those red books, like all of the ones I've physically held up so far, I have a dedicated vlog to it. You can check it out on my channel. Next up, I read a ebook short story from Matthew Riley. This is called Jack West Jr. and the Chinese Splashdown, which is just a tiny little short set in the Jack West series. It was fine. It was interesting. It kind of is drawing up some threads that are going to be in play in the next book, which I'm interested to see how they work. I give it 3 stars. It just was nothing complex or special. Then I listened to All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This is a memoir, and like a YA memoir is how it's described. Like it's targeting teens, and I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by the author, which I loved. This is dealing a lot with gender and sexuality, and how like gender expression and sexuality feed into each other and that kind of thing. George M. Johnson is a queer advocate, and is black, and It really explores all those intersections of identities. There are trigger warnings for sexual assault and incest. But overall it's really hopeful and like empowering, and I recommend this to like all queer kids. It's so good. I give it 5 stars if you couldn't tell. Then April Page and I buddy read The Dark Vault, which is a bind up of The Archived, The Unbound, and Leave the Window Open, which is a short story set in this world. I had read The Archived before and I gave it 5 stars. I switched it down to 4 stars this time. It just didn't quite hit the perfect beats this time, but it was really fun and entertaining. I feel like I was more freely giving out my 5 stars then than I am now. It just wasn't quite 5-star material anymore, but I did really enjoy it. I also gave The Unbound 4 stars and Leave the Window Open also 4 stars, so it's 4 stars all the way through. I really enjoyed this. V. Schwab's writing is normally an A+ for me. There's not much of hers that I don't like, and I'm glad to finally have finished what is available of this series, and I do hope she finishes the series someday. It's a YA fantasy that explores it's more like a paranormal, and our main character is a keeper. Her name's Mackenzie. She's a keeper, which means she patrols these halls called the Narrows, where the dead can kind of escape into, and the dead are kept in like a library, so it's her job to like return them to the library. It's really interesting. I like the series. The stakes are really well developed, and the twists and turns. Although Mackenzie can be an idiot, you can see where she's trying to come from. She just has a lot of trust issues, and it was very entertaining. Next up we have Twice Magic, which is the second Wizards of Once novel by Cressida Cowell. I listened to the audiobook of this, which is narrated by David Tennant, and read along. It has lots of pictures and stuff if you were interested. This series is super fun. It's following the wizards, and this is Tsar, and he didn't have magic, so he got some witch blood, I think, and got himself some witch magic, which is not good. Like, the witches are meant to be died out. And then we have Wish, who is a warrior child, but she has magic, and she has magic that can control iron, which is like unheard of. And she has a friend who's an enchanted spoon. This is just so cute. This is just so fun. It's twisty and turny. I can't wait to continue reading this series. I think it's finishing soon, so I'm gonna pick up book 3 when I can. Maybe today when I go to the bookstore if they have it. And I'm, yeah, very excited to continue this series. I gave this one 4 stars. Then I read a short story called A Lady's Maid by Sarah Gailey. This is a steampunk story. I gave it 5 stars. It was freaking phenomenal. We follow an android who kind of was made to be the wife of her maker. But he trained her a bit poorly. It's very interesting. Oh, my camera says it's dying. We're gonna keep pushing through. We'll see how long this lasts. I also listened to Ghost. I gave 5 stars to A Lady's Maid. I also listened to Ghost Squad by Clarabelle A. Ortega. I gave this 4 stars. This is a middle grade paranormal mystery dealing with ghosts. And our main character, oh God, I can't remember her name. What's her name? Lucelli can see her her ancestors and like aunties and stuff as fireflies, and they come to her as ghosts and she can talk to them, but they're going missing one by one, or things are happening to them, and there's a ghost growing presence in her town, and her and her best friend Sydney are trying to deal with it, and it's great. It's Ghostbusters, definitely. Like, it's so good. And it Lucelli is Mexican. She's Latina. I'm not 100% sure where from. I can't remember. But it's very Latin and really embraces that heritage, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Next up we have A Sprinkle of Sorcery by Michelle Harrison, which is the sequel to A Pinch of Magic. This was super fun. It deals with pirates, and I loved that. I gave this 5 stars. It follows the same 3 sisters from the first book, Betty, Charlie, and Fliss, and they're on a pirate adventure. It was so good. The plot twist at the end blew my mind. It was great. I gave it 5 stars. This is middle grade, obviously. Then I read a couple of graphic novels. We have Witchy by Ariel Slame Riez. This is a graphic novel where your magic is determined by the length of your hair. I didn't love this. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I feel like just the plot wasn't what I expected, and it kind of went in directions that I didn't love. And the art style is not my fave, but I did overall enjoy it, so 3 stars. I also read An Embarrassment of Witches by Sophie Goldstein and Jen Jordan. I gave this one 4 stars. I absolutely loved it. It's a college graphic novel dealing with in this magical world where everyone is magic. It's very witch based, and it's dealing with a lot of the troubles of being like having finished your degree and what do you do next. It was so good. I gave it 4 stars. And I also read Spectacle, the second book. This I gave 5 stars. This is a also witchy kind of story, and we follow sisters Anna and Kat, and they're in this paranormal circus where one of them got murdered and is now a ghost, and they're trying to figure out who killed her and what's going on. But in this volume, all the different members of the circus are becoming freaks. And it was so fun and good, and I love this series. The art style is really interesting. Like, it's different than most graphic novels, but it's so good. Alright, so the angle might have changed a little bit. I'm honestly not sure. I had to charge my camera. But let's get started on the last couple of things on this list. So, I was just talking about Felix Ever After by Kaysen Calendar. This is a contemporary YA following following Felix, who is a trans boy working in, he's an artist, he's at like a art summer school, and he's really trying to get into a fancy art school. I can't remember the name of the college. Honestly, American colleges blur together in my mind, but Brown maybe? And his rival, who also goes to art school, is also trying to get in. But his rival's white, has a lot of money, and Felix is black and obviously queer. He's from a single parent household, and dealing with like the problems of like he won't be able to go to this college if he doesn't have a scholarship. There's only one available and this other kid's competing with him for it, and so he's dealing with a lot of struggles around like mentally dealing with the idea of like privilege and how that's going to play out and ultimately affect his life. And then him and his best friend have a really strong connection. In fact, I would say they were queer platonic from the start of this, but they don't really see it. And then a gallery kind of gets put up with photos from Felix's past, including his dead name, that like it's not outing him because everyone knew he was trans, but kind of like, oh my god, sissy, stop it, reveal more than he ever wanted to reveal to his classmates. And a like random mystery Instagram account is behind it, but he doesn't know which of his classmates was responsible. And he thinks he knows it. He thinks it's his rival, so he makes his own like fake account and is trying to get gossip, something to like get back at his rival. So it's got some catfishing elements where Felix is trying to catfish his rival to get some kind of dirt on him. There's like a pseudo love triangle, and it's just, oh, this was so good. Felix is flawed. Well, everyone's flawed in this. It's so realistic and great. But Felix is really dealing with his own sense of righteousness and his grief and pain, and oh, it's just so good. The romance was adorable. It took too long to get there, well, not too long, but I was there just like, get together. But it was paced appropriately. I just was like secondhand frustrated for them because I thought it was pretty obvious. And yeah, it was just so good. I loved it to pieces. I gave it 5 stars. Then I read the Deck of Omens by Christine Lynn Herman. This is the sequel to The Devouring Grey. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I had such mixed feelings about it. I love the atmosphere of this series, but in this second book, like the sequel, like the final half of the duology, we follow different characters from the first half, and I personally enjoyed those characters in the first book more. But I loved the way the plot developed and turned out in this one, and I loved the atmosphere. So it was kind of a, like, you win some, you lose some scenario. So ultimately I gave this 4 stars. This is a YA paranormal fantasy following this town where there is like a beast inside this, they call it the Grey. It's like an alternate forest that some of them go into, and the descendants of the 4 founders of the town have magical powers that are meant to help them hold back this Grey and the beast. So we're kind of following that. It was really fun and entertaining, super atmospheric. It's very dramatic. It's like queer teens being dramatic, but it was very fun and entertaining. I gave it 4 stars. Next up we have The Sea of Monsters, which is the second Percy Jackson book by Rick Riordan. I've never read this series before, so I'm reading it for the first time. I listened along to the audiobook and read along, and I really enjoyed it. Percy Jackson, I feel like everyone knows what Percy Jackson is, and this one was fun and entertaining. It's kind of a parts of the Odyssey retelling, and it was really good. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It was fun and entertaining, and I breezed through it. It was great. Then I read The Art of Three by Rachel McRae and no, that's not it. Erin McRae and Rachelyn Maltese. This is a polyamorous romance. We follow Jamie. Oh, what are the other 2? I literally just finished reading this not that long ago. Jamie, Callum, and Nerea. And Callum and Nerea have been married for like 40 years. Callum's kind of like a George Clooney kind of character. And Nerea is his wife, and she's Spanish, and Callum and Jamie are British, or Jamie's Irish. Jamie's like a young up and coming actor. He's like 24, I think. And him and Callum start a romance, and ultimately the 3 of them are in a like close triad together. I loved the romance elements and the romance, like the actual relationship, and the focus that was there on communication and consent and all those kind of things. I loved that. I thought it was really romantic and really sweet. I'm not normally a fan of age gap romances, and this kind of like overcomes that. Like I was still like, ugh, age gap. But like it was still enjoyable. It also had a plot twist that is not a trope I appreciate at all, but again it was done in a way that kind of overcame some of my ickiness about the trope itself. Like it was like the best done way that trope could be done, but it's not a trope I enjoy, if that makes sense. Overall it was just really sweet and wholesome as a romance. I really enjoyed it. I wish there was more like any smut. It's smut free. If that's something that you value and you want like a romance with no smut, this is it. It implies a lot of sexual moments, but then it's very, very fake black. Like they just kind of talk about that they will do that, or like they had sex, full stop, kind of thing. So I wish it had some smut, but overall it was really fun and sweet and flirty, and I loved the romance. I gave it 4 stars. Just, yeah, there were a few elements that I would have changed, and I would have preferred some smut in there. Then I read another romance, which is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is like writers dealing with writer's block, having a romance. Our 2 main characters, she's a women's fiction writer, and he is a action adventure kind of writer, thrillery kind of writer, and they switch genres because they're both dealing with writer's block, and it's romance along the way. And I personally really enjoyed it. I thought it was great fun. I listened to the audiobook, and I gave it 4 stars. It was really good. 2 more things. We have Similar Ascends by Josiah Bancroft, which I read literally all month. It was my edging prompt for Not Safe for Workathon. I didn't really go through my Not Safe for Workathon prompts here, did I? No, not at all. I have no idea what to think about it. It's a complex fantasy set in this world where there's this famous tower and it extends up into the sky. The tower extends up into the sky and there's all these different levels where different things are going on. And it's very dark. It's dealing a lot with like capitalism and stuff. It's very confusing. We follow Senlin, Thomas Senlin. Him and his wife go to the tower for their honeymoon, but they get separated, which is a thing that just happens in this world. And he's on a mission to try and get her back. It's freaking weird. I'm not sure if it's weird in a good way or just weird. It has a very kind of like archaic style to me. It reads like similar to something like Dorian Gray, that kind of writing style. So to me it seems like really old-fashioned, but I think that's chosen intentionally to like kind of set the concept of the world as a like similar time to then. And then yeah, it's a lot about these different levels of the tower and what's happening at all these different levels and how they play into each other, and it's all really fucking weird. I don't know if I'm going to continue this series. I'm really torn about it. Like on one hand the world is fascinating, but on the other hand it's freaking weird and confronting. And I don't know what to do. We'll see. I kind of want to buy the second one. I'm so torn. I'm so torn. Like I didn't enjoy this, but I'm fascinated by it in like a perverse way. It's weird. But I gave this 3 stars. Still don't know what to think about it. I'm so confused. If anyone has read this and would like to chat with me about it, please do. I am so confused. I feel like it's rife with potential for literary analysis, but I don't know if I have the brain cells to do that. And finally we have Dig by A.S. King. This is also a very weird book, but on the other hand I gave this 5 stars. This is an exploration of white supremacy, capitalism, racism, from a white perspective. We follow 5 kids who all tie into this older couple. Really, like, it's not really spoilers because I think it's implied pretty early on, but essentially it's these 5 grandkids. They're all teenagers. The grandparents are really, really rich, but they're like basically not connected to the grandkids at all. They've got that I think the youngest daughter, I think, had a teen pregnancy, so they just cut her off. And like, yeah, a lot of them, different things happened to the kids' parents, which then keep them super separated from the grandparents. The kids are all like dealing with their, like, they all recognize that their grandparents are racist as fuck, but dealing with the nuance of like how they tie into racist structures and stuff is really interesting. Like, it's exploring them pushing the boundaries of their own participation in like a racist system. It's super weird, super confronting. It's not comfy, which is very intentional. There's trigger warnings for sexual assault, murder, mental health things. Obviously racism is a big component of this. Yeah, it's super confronting, but I also found it fascinating, and I like couldn't look away. It was like a train wreck you couldn't stop watching. I was absolutely fascinated as this progressed, and it was such a like powerful experience that I had to give it 5 stars. So those are all the books that I read in the month of June. Yeah, it was a lot. June seemed to go for like no time as it happened, and now it seems like ages ago, and we're only like 5 days into July. I feel like I had a good reading month overall. I really enjoyed a lot of what I read. I didn't hate much of it, which I'm very happy about. And despite many times in the month feeling like I wasn't reading very fast and wasn't really getting through anything, I read like 35 things. I read 36 things. Despite feeling, yeah, like the month was, like I was having a slow reading month. So don't know what happened there. Maybe it can continue in July. That would be great. Thanks. Anyway, that's it. That's what I read. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's chaotic, it's a mess. I'm still a little bit sick, so apologies if you can tell and it sounds awful because I'm like congested. Let me know if you've read any of these and would like to chat about them. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Otherwise, I'll see you soon with another video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!